Okay. So let me, I'm going to start off, hold on, let me pull up my presentations here. And I sent some of you this information in the email that I sent out as a reminder earlier today. But I just want to sort of go over a little bit of um, our agenda for today, and that way those who are following on the recording can sort of understand where we're going, and they can follow along with the slides that I'm sending to them as well. So as I mentioned, we're going to recap institution renewals. There's going to likely be some changes coming up in the next year for the 2019-2020 renewal, or 2020-2021. I'm sorry, I'm already getting my years mixed up, renewal season. And then I want to talk a little bit about doing sort of a organization-wide, so every region-wide outreach campaign to some of our lapsed institutions or institutions that have never been members before, and see, because usually if institutions are members and are supportive of NASPA as an organization, then it's a pretty good way for us to be able to speak to the individuals at their student affairs offices as well. And then, as I mentioned, I really just want to start looking in the next two meetings, so in December and January, starting to have this conversation, well, starting now through December and January, talking about goals for 2020. So thinking about the type of outreach that we can do and what types of institutions. I've identified, along with Nathan and our team, potentially focusing on minority serving institutions that are not current or have never been members of NASPA from a state and a regional standpoint, and what's our value statement to these institutions that we can all, as all of the regions together, can agree on, so that way we have a consistent message that we are sending out to everybody. How are we going to track our progress? What makes sense, as a collaborative space? I know that some regions are really heavy in using BoardEffect. Some people are using Google. Some people are using Dropbox, which is fine. And if there are a variety of different platforms that work for the different regions, is great. But for something like this organization-wide outreach, what would make sense for all of us to be using? Or is there a way for us to manage this process on a variety of different platforms from a region or state perspective? And then finally, I'm just going to touch base on our new member onboarding campaign that all of you have all given me feedback on and have been hearing about for the last few months. And I just want to update you on what those next steps are going to be. So I'm actually going to stop sharing this, and I'm going to give you all just a quick recap of what our institutional renewal season ended like for the 2018-2019 renewal season for the 1920 membership year. So it's a little confusing, but if you can follow along with me in terms of this recap. So as you can see over the past couple of years, and I sent all of you, or may not have sent you the link to this, and I will send this in the recording, but you can certainly follow along. But our 2019 year is this dark blue line, if you can follow my mouse right here. So every year since 2014, which is when we started collecting a lot of this data on a much more regular basis, you can see how much we have actually grown. And so this is our best year ever, followed by last year, which was previously the best year ever, followed previously before that in 2017, which was also a pretty stellar year for institutional growth. We grew the number of institutional members that we had. We also consistently kept members who had been members the previous year, and they had renewed for another year. And that's what's really important here, is not just bringing a specific number in, but really retaining the members that we have year to year. And so I'll be able to show you here in the next few slides how we've been able to do that. So some key things in terms of the process that we adhered to for the 18-19 year: we typically wrap up every year in November. So I'm getting ready to wrap up with the executive team and the core team that works on our institutional renewal campaign next week. And then in January of each year, we start planning. We start thinking really seriously about the upcoming year. When is the best time to start reaching out to everybody? And this is in conjunction with the fact that we are now very deep into conference season, in that we have multiple conferences that are happening nationwide with NASPA. And this is also leading up about 2 months prior to our annual conference. So all of this is happening on top of all of the other things during the late winter, early spring season at NASPA, and as well as on your campuses. So last year, or this year, we had done what we had done in previous years, which is Jenna Hartsfield, who is on the information management and customer experience team, and I, each year since 2017, have been doing calls to previously lapsed institutions from the past 3 years. And those are institutions that decided for whatever year not to renew. So this past January, we reached out to those who had lapsed in 2016, 2017, and 2018. So these are institutions who have not been NASPA institutional members for anywhere from 1 to 3 years. And we divided up that campaign, and we had the small colleges and universities division take some of those institutions, and then we had the community colleges divisions call some of their schools as well, and then the remainder of schools, Jenna, myself, and our intern at the time took up calling them. And part of the reason that we do these lapsed call campaigns is we like to start each renewal season, which typically happens around late April, May, with a surplus of institutions that have already renewed. So each year, we've increased that surplus. So when the renewal campaign started this year, we had over, I want to say, 70 schools that had already renewed before we even started sending out invoices in May. So starting out with a surplus is really helpful because it helps us start with a good momentum and keep that momentum going. And I'll talk a little bit later about how we want to continue doing that and bringing in all of you from the regional and state standpoint to do that with us as well. So we can really sort of essentially pad our numbers prior to dropping those invoices, so that way we can keep that momentum up throughout the campaign season. In April, we typically upload information from iPads. As you know, that is data that is submitted to the Department of Education. We start looking at our dues increases and our new dues rates, and we create new dues matrices for the different institutional levels. So our traditional four-year institutions, our community colleges, and our international institutions. And typically in the last couple of years, we've had anywhere from like a 1 to 2% increase in dues. And we're likely going to continue to be doing that. I believe 1 year we didn't have a dues increase. And so this is all going to be very dependent as well on just how we're doing financially as we come into renewal season. So the last 2 years, we've had a 2% increase. I wouldn't be surprised if we had something similar again as we come into the 2020-2021 campaign season for institutional renewals. So just something to keep in mind as people ask about that. And then in April, we start what we call our phone campaign to proxies. A proxy is somebody at the institution in addition to the vice president for student affairs. What we've found is that vice presidents for student affairs typically have another staff member, oftentimes an executive assistant or an administrative assistant working directly with the vice president, work with all of these renewal invoices that are coming through. So in addition to obviously making sure that our database is updated with the most recent vice presidents for student affairs, who we call voting delegates if they are an institutional member. We also contact every single one of them. So this year we'll be contacting and updating over 1,300 institutions to see if there is a secondary person on their staff who we can contact about the upcoming renewals that are coming through. And this is just to ensure that we are getting the messaging across to our institutions as quickly and as early as possible, because oftentimes institutions aren't renewing because they don't value NASPA. It's just that they probably forgot and just didn't receive that email. It got buried somewhere. They may not have received that paper invoice. So starting in April, we contact all of the institutions just to ensure that we still have the correct proxy or secondary person available to contact. In May, we create our renewal dashboard for the current year, and I can show that to all of you as well, so you remember what that looks like and the information on there. July through May, we also send out an email from Kevin. Kevin drafts an email that he sends to all institutional members, just encouraging them to renew for the following year and to just let them know about all of the things that NASPA had done in the previous year leading up to the campaign. And then, as you all know, in July and August, you all helped out in contacting those institutions whose memberships expire on June 30th. And then October 1st is our absolute hard drop date for anybody who has not yet renewed. So anyone who didn't renew as of October 1st was formally dropped as an institutional member. As a courtesy, we do give members 3 additional months of member benefits to give them time to submit their renewal dues, just because fiscal years vary from institution to institution at times. And so we want to make sure that we are aware of that and that we are respectful of the fact that not everybody's fiscal years start on July 1st, and some of them start in September, a few of them in October as well. So a couple of things by the numbers. This year, this is a record number for us in that we have 1,318 institutions, and that is a renewal rate of 92%. So 92% of our institutions out of that 1,318 are institutions who were members from the previous year, and that's really great. We really want people to come back year to year. For those of you who are familiar with retention numbers, that's a really great retention number for us, and we certainly want to keep doing that. Our total revenue for the year, so you can see there, was over 1.3 million. We had 131 institutions either join NASPA as an institutional member for the first time or rejoin NASPA as an institutional member after having been gone for 1 or more years. And that's a 4% growth for us this year, from 1,268 last year to 1,318 this year. Those are my numbers as of last week. So this is just so you all know all of the different touch points that we had with our institutions, starting with our proxy campaign. We send parallel emails to the proxy, so the secondary contact at the institution, as well as the voting delegate. And we send parallel emails to them, as well as individual emails to the secondary contact in the event that somebody hasn't received something. And in the middle of all of this, we are also having our regional call campaign that you all were helping with, our lapsed member campaign that the community college division and the small colleges and universities division was working on. So there are multiple touch points where we are contacting institutions. And so part of this is to ensure that we are getting that communication out. We realize that institutional renewals happens right at the end of the traditional university calendar and right into orientation and summer and training, as well as vacations for a lot of people on campus. And so we want to make sure that we are getting in touch with them as often as possible, so that way we know that they have the information they need to renew their institutional membership for the following year. Are there any questions, Alyssa or Dee, or even Colleen, because I know this is probably like a more detailed view of institutional renewals that I can answer for any of you at this time? It went really well. I will say, in terms of the work that you all did and contributed, your state directors, your other volunteer leaders from your regions, all of the phone calls and emails really paid off to get us to that 1318 number, and we could not have gotten there without the help of our regional support. And so we are very, very thankful for that. The next thing that I want to just kind of go through sort of after that is sort of what's next. So we have a successful institutional campaign. We're going to meet with our executive team as well as the core team that works on institutional renewals next week, right before Thanksgiving holidays, to just determine what the 2020-2021 year is going to look like. And as soon as we understand what we need to do, what changes are going to happen, I will let you all know that in our next meeting, so that way you can start preparing yourselves for those of you who are staying on and whose terms aren't ending, as you prepare for some of these sort of key calendar dates. So again, like I said, this is just a really great number, 92% who renewed. The other thing that I wanted to share, one of the things that we have with our institutional renewals is something called an institutional upgrade. And I'm actually trying to pull this up on our NASPA website now so I can share this with you. But if you purchase an institutional renewal membership or an institutional membership, you can upgrade your membership. You can also upgrade your individual membership. But you can upgrade your institutional membership as well. And what the upgrade gives you is online access to our online learning community, to live briefings, essentially, that the voting delegate can then share with their staff. And so let me just share this screen with you. So if you go to our website, naspa.org/about/membership/institutions, and you scroll to the bottom, you'll see there's something here called the institutional membership upgrade. It's an additional $349 on top of whatever those dues are. But this is exclusive just for institutional members, and it's basically $1,200 worth of online content that is immediate access. And so you get immediate access to 10 downloadable versions of these online sessions. You can listen to them in audio format for those who might want to listen to them sort of in that podcast style, as well as video format. Teams are able to watch these sessions at any time. And so for those of you who are working on institutions where professional development is a key part of everyone's role, and you're looking for opportunities to get that professional development out to your staff or to your institution, outside of the attending an actual conference, I think the online learning community subscription package upgrade is a really great thing to do. You can see there's quite a number of sessions. They change every single year. So every year you get access to 10 new sessions that are specifically curated, and really important in the fact that we're making sure that they are relevant to what's happening or what has happened in the last year in higher ed. And then anybody at the institution who are individual members then receive an additional 15% off of any other online learning community presentation. So it's there's like a special code that you receive, you get special access to this, and it's all sent to the voting delegate. And so this is a really neat upgrade that we've been doing for a few years now. We don't typically advertise it, but it's something that we mention with our institutional renewals. And this year, 36%, there was a 36% increase in upgrade purchases. And so that's really great for us from a revenue standpoint, obviously, but it also means that we have more campuses who are taking advantage of our online learning community and the resources that are available there to be professional development resources for their staff. And so that's really great for us to hear and to know about. I mentioned that our small colleges and universities, as well as our community colleges, were assisting during the institutional renewal process in reaching out to institutions that fell under their specific division. So anybody who is identified as a small college or university, or anyone or any institution that was identified as a community college. And they helped us break down those different lists, and people from that division started contacting schools. So out of the 64 schools that had lapsed anywhere between 1 to 3 years for small colleges and universities, 8 of them rejoined for this past year. It doesn't seem like a large number, but that's 8 institutions that haven't been members of NASPA anywhere from 1 to 3 years. And based on the outreach that they received, they felt that it was important for them to come back and be part of NASPA as an institutional member. And then with our community colleges, out of the 50 institutions that had lapsed that were identified between 2016 and 2018, 5 rejoined for 2019. And that's especially great from a community college standpoint. We'd really like to increase the number of our community colleges that are institutional members. I think a lot of the work that we're doing at NASPA and with higher education and student affairs as a whole is really skewing towards being something that anyone from any of these size colleges can benefit from. And so we're really excited that 5 community colleges rejoined this past year. Right now, this box right here says regions. These are the number of institutions that decided not to join or not to renew for for this current school year. So LAC has 4 institutions that have not renewed their membership. Manasa 6, Region 1 has 8. And also keep in mind, as these numbers get bigger, these are also in some of the places with the bigger numbers are bigger regions. And so there was a larger pool of institutions there. Region 2 had 14, Region 3 24. For West, you have 8 that are outstanding. For East has 10, 5 has 9, and Region 6 has 12. So right now, I am actually reaching out to all of these institutions, letting them know. Some of them just may not realize that their institutional membership has expired because they either have a new vice president for student affairs that changed, there was a change in leadership and they just did not get a continuation of those different touch points that I had mentioned earlier. They might have had new staff come in, so their proxy or their secondary contact on campus may have left and did not, there was no continuation of that contact with them either. And so I'm right now working, and hopefully soon we'll have some assistance from some of our interns to finish up contacting these institutions who were members last year and have not renewed for this year. If any of you are interested in also reaching out, I am happy to send you the call script as well as the link to the spreadsheet. I'll also include that when I follow up with notes from this meeting, just in case you want to see which institutions those are. And if they happen to be an institution that you're familiar with and you would like to reach out, that would be fantastic. I will be doing that through the end of this year to just encourage them to renew for the remainder of the 2019-2020 school year. If they do not renew, we'll basically switch our conversation with them, and starting in January, we're going to contact them and just ask them to, since they decided not to renew for the 19-20 year, to consider coming back for the 2020-21 school year. So my goals, as I mentioned earlier, is I would like to increase the number of institutions that rejoin year to year. This year was our best. I think we can continue to be better. I don't think that the work that NASPA does, I feel, is important enough that our institutions should be able to find value in not just the discounts that they receive as members, but the resources that are then available to their individual staff on their campuses and organizations. And I would like to see anywhere from a 5 to 10% increase. I mentioned 4% this year was our increase. I'd like that to go anywhere between 5 and 10% in terms of our renewed institutions and then overall institutional membership. So we're at 1318 now. I'd like that number to increase anywhere between 5 and 10% for next year. So I'd like that little growth chart that I showed earlier to just continue trending upwards. And then I'd like to either meet or exceed our renewal rate. So again, we had a great renewal rate this year. 92% of our institutions decided to renew for another year, which is excellent. But I'd like us to continue growing that renewal rate. And so I'd like us to have less and less institutions at the end of October 1st to contact in terms of those who've just gone ahead and let their memberships lapse. As I mentioned this, I'd like to, as far as increasing the rejoin rates, I'd like to work with all of you to ensure that we meet and exceed these goals. So what needs to be done from a regional standpoint? Do we need to start contacting these schools earlier? Is there some type of digital flyer that we should be producing? I know that I've spoken multiple times, especially with Peggy in Region 3, about, we don't have any collateral that we're really sending out or that we have when you all are either at an event or on site, or that you can easily pull up and send to a prospective institution, for example. I'd like to start looking at minority serving institutions and divide those up by region. Right now, I have a little over 600 institutions that I have identified that have never been NASPA members, at least according to our database. And I have them divided up by region and then also labeled on the type of minority serving institution that they are. So whether they are a tribal college, an HBCU, Hispanic serving institution, whichever category that they fall under. So I'd like to, in our next few meetings, start looking at that and to see if we can figure out what would be the best campaign when reaching out to minority serving institutions. I think, a lot of times it's not just going to be a very clean cut, you should join NASPA, especially since we don't have a single sort of value statement for why you should join NASPA that we, between all the regions that can be consistent. So I'd also like to, over the next couple of meetings, develop sort of a singular vision statement essentially for this outreach, and have sort of a very similar collaborative elevator speech that you all could be using when you are doing this outreach, if we decide that this outreach is, one, feasible, and two, if it is beneficial to your regions and your state directors as well. And then the other goal that I've listed here is really looking even bigger at creating sort of a joint organizational wide process. So I want to work across all of our regions together to start creating a membership recruiting and retention process that can be templates that all the regions can use. And so as those of you who are membership coordinators turn over into new volunteer leadership roles, whoever takes over for membership within your region, whoever takes over as a state coordinator, state director, that there is sort of a common template that they can all use with some sort of best practices that are outlined that we all together will determine, hopefully within the next few months, that then you can sort of pass on. So that way our recruiting and our retention practices are all sort of aligned, and then you can take that and tailor it to what makes sense to your individual regions and your areas. So that's really it. I wanted to sort of share those goals, close out our institutional renewals, give you all high fives for doing such a great job in getting us to that 1318 number, and just letting you know that we're still doing and continuing to reach out to those institutions who have let their memberships lapse to see if they want to continue their institutional membership with us for the remainder of the year, because that then takes that 1318 number up even more, and then hopefully continues to grow our institutional membership throughout. So with that, are there any questions just in general about what I've shared, or any feedback that you'd like to give me on some of those goals that I'm hoping that we'll be able to get started on and working on for 2020?
I'm excited to try and come up with some way to make it cohesive across all regions of just what we're doing. I know you had a couple, I don't know if it was the last one or the one before, but talking about engagement calendars, what we're doing. And so to start to do that, tied to that, maybe even to start thinking of how we can, because if we're taking away the email process through the new campaign that you're working on, but just to create that cohesive, this is what we're doing, I think is a great idea, and I think it'll help, especially because then when we're comparing, like I'm reporting out to our region, they're like, well, what are other regions doing? Then we know, and there's no question of what we're doing differently.
And hopefully, Alyssa, especially, maybe you can relate to this a little as well, is that as you transition roles within your region, different volunteer roles, I think it's sometimes nice to just be able to hand them these templates to say, welcome, new membership coordinator. This is what we've been doing, this is a blueprint for what you can start doing, and you can tailor it however you want. You can customize it, but I think sometimes having that blueprint in place is not only efficient, but I think it's also a big relief as you're starting on what I think is a really big and important role within your region, which is how do you engage your members, and then how do you bring new faces on as well? Because I think that's really important.
Yeah, I agree.
And, as I said, I think, we've been trying to do a lot of things to sort of make sure that we actually have processes in place so that way, while I love and appreciate all the individual requests and the meetings that I've had the opportunity to have across all of the regions, is there a better space for us to have a repository of like training videos and just information on this is how you use the email tool, this is when you should, these are the types of reports, and this is how you should read it, and this is what it means. And so I do think that it's important for us to start looking forward, and how can we make this sort of like a nice, in the old school days, you get like a binder when you started work, right? With like all of these different sections and templates of how things were. So how do we do that in a digital space that can easily be shared with everybody? So my task to you all really, as you start thinking for like our next few meetings, is just platform wise. I don't know how many of you all are using Board Effect regularly. Some people are. Some people aren't. I'm also a KC liaison, and I know our KC uses Board Effect like they use it all the time. And I do know from experience, having been here at NASPA for a few years, is that that's not always the case, even though we have access to it. So what is a great cloud-based platform that is both collaborative and easy to use and easy to access? Because I also don't want us to have to keep adding new usernames and passwords to like what I'm sure is like a very growing list for everybody on campus. So just start thinking about that as well, and I'll task everybody with that when I send the follow-up notes for this meeting. But that's really it for November. We've just sort of really been just wrapping a lot of things up, and as I just mentioned, we start this process all over again for institutional renewals in January. But then also for those of you who are just also looking at your next year's goals, and that you've been speaking with your regional leadership, I talk a lot about institutions just because, as I mentioned, that's a really easy group to start working with. But if you all want to do something with individual members as well, and I mentioned this in the past to maybe individual regional membership coordinators, or maybe even in one of these meetings is, different state directors are doing things and regions are doing things differently. So if there is a desire, I think as we go into making these goals, we can also look at how we want to approach our individual members as well, in that we don't often think about maybe like recruiting spaces, but hopefully as we have better data that's coming through, I'm hoping sometime this spring that I can give an idea of our membership based on their professional level. So over the years, like how many new professionals or graduate students have we had year to year? Has this been a really good growth year for NASPA in terms of that professional level, our mid-level professionals, senior level? So I'll hopefully in the spring be able to tackle that. That's a little bit of a bigger task in that there's a lot of different things have to go into getting that information. But that certainly is something that I'm hoping to have as well. And then, and then just a final note, and then if there are no other questions, you all can have like 20 minutes of your day back, is Nathan and I have been working on drafting, and we've been working with Matt Bennett in our marketing communications team to start really getting the technical aspects down for this new member campaign. But really the biggest thing that we're going to be tackling is drafting out the welcome email that every new or returning, anyone who makes a membership purchase right now should receive some type of response from NASPA, even if it's a thanks for buying this membership. And that's not happening right now for every person. It's only happening for people who are presumed to be brand new NASPA members. So we're working on finishing up the draft that's going to go out. It's going to be divided by professional level, regardless if they've been NASPA members for 15 years or like 5 minutes. We want to send something to acknowledge the fact that they are making an investment in the organization in some way. And so we will send all of you the copies of that once we have that drafted out and sort of flushed out, so that way you also all know what communication is going out to those in your region. So that's the next step. So stay tuned for that. Are there any other questions, comments, concerns? For those of you who are celebrating Thanksgiving, have a wonderful Thanksgiving holiday, especially if you're taking off like this weekend or early next week. And then I will see you all at the next meeting. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.